Israel is now seeking to lure African migrants, some of the 30,000 African asylum seekers, to join the quote-unquote war effort with the promise that they'll be given some sort of a permanent status. But the same article, quoting Haaretz, has told us that those who have joined have actually not received any permanent status or citizenship. The entire procedure is totally non-transparent, and you can't even find out where Israel is sending these individuals, and that they're only receiving 2 weeks of training before they're getting dropped off in Gaza. So
dropping them off with McDonald's and a flak vest. Netanyahu, also known as Milikowski, had said that he was going to deport all African migrants. So it's a complete 180 from deporting them to Africa versus recruiting them for the genocide.
Hello and welcome to episode 129 of the Palestine Pod, the weekly podcast where we break down the latest headlines dealing with Palestine from all over the world and bring you stories, commentary, and interviews with the aim of supporting the Palestinian struggle for decolonization, justice, and equal rights. I'm one of your hosts, Lara E. You might know me from Instagram as @GazanGirl, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mikey B.
What's up, y'all? Mikey B on TikTok, Michael Schertzer on Instagram. And you can call me Mikey Intifada if you work for the Breakfast Club. Especially if your name is Angela Rye.
Before we get into today's episode, please like, comment, subscribe if you hang out with us on YouTube. And if you're listening on a podcast app, subscribe and leave a review. As always, you can find our full episodes and sources on PalestinePod.com. And if you want to get involved in the conversation, reach out to us at PalestinePod@gmail.com and give us a follow on Instagram @ThePalestinePod. You can also find us on Patreon, where you get early access to the Palestine Pod episodes and additional podcasts per week. It's a little more laid back. We talk politics, Palestine pop culture, and get a little more personal. We're also hosting our monthly Zoom happy hours with our Patreon subscribers only. So check us out on patreon.com/PalestinePod. So I want to start with something a little hopeful.
Okay, that sounds nice.
Yes, it does sound nice, does it not?
Haven't heard those words in a while.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's hard to be hopeful, but I think it's worth it to go over some things that should make us feel hopeful.
Please.
The world has not stepped up at the level of states in order to put pressure on Israel in concrete ways, in order to compel it to comply with its international obligations, namely the obligation of not committing genocide and ending the illegal occupation. Nevertheless,
you're talking about sanctions?
I'm talking about sanctions. Nevertheless, there has been a cost to the occupation, and I think it's worth it to go over some of those elements right now, which analysts, including even Zionist analysts, are saying may mark the downfall of this regime.
Inshallah. Fingers crossed.
Sorry, just the inshallah is great.
Thank you so much.
Many months ago, you may remember that chip maker Intel halted their plans to build a $25 billion Israel plant. Now, of course, they didn't say that this had anything to do with Israel's behavior or opposition to the occupation or Israel's actions in Gaza, but nevertheless, the investment was revoked. In parallel, the Times of Israel reported that investment in Israeli tech firms slumps by 56%, hit by political upheaval response to the quote-unquote war. So that's huge because the Israeli tech sector is one of the biggest sectors in the country and on which the country survives and thrives, right? And so if that sector, the main thing that they have going for themselves, is being hit in this way, it's not insignificant. Uh-oh.
No, it's good. That is my political analysis. Yes, we already know that 46,000 businesses have closed down. What's the latest count on businesses?
According to the Times of Israel, up to 60,000 Israeli businesses may close in 2024.
Oh, no.
The quote-unquote war takes toll on the economy. So you might be citing the businesses that have already closed down. Is that what you're citing? Businesses that have already closed down?
Yeah, that's the businesses. 45 or 46 was the number that was reported about a month ago when I made a video on BDS updates.
And that was businesses that have already closed down.
Already closed down. Yeah, this is 60,000 that is projected to close down within the year. So
yes,
we're talking about what's already been done and what will be, baby. You know what I'm saying? I can envision a future with fewer Israeli businesses. Can you?
According to Ynet News, 1 in 10 Israeli hotels on the brink of going under.
Oh
According
no. Do you know how a Zionist from Australia reacts to that? Oh no.
According to Business Insider, Israel's tourism industry is struggling under the weight of the war.
It's the weight of those 2,000-pound bombs. They're heavy.
Yes, according to Israeli media, the academic boycotts are also having an impact. Cancellation of invitations to conferences, rejection of articles and grants, quote unquote, a covert boycott of Israel in the world's academia has taken place. Haaretz also cites to individuals' responses to Israeli media, quote, I won't work with you. You're committing genocide. Israeli academia faces an unprecedented boycott. These are headlines. You can check out the articles if you're interested in the details, but we're trying to give just an overview of the situation.
They're like, the amount of invitations that I've gotten to conferences has really been affected by this genocide. And I just really like Florida. So can I get those invites back? It's
Yeah,
like, hey,
I
fella,
mean,
if you love Florida so much, let me tell you where you should move. All right. I hope he picks up alligator wrestling.
let's talk about the economy. Fitch's downgrades Israel's credit rating, warning war could last well into 2025. That was reported by the Times of Israel. Also reported by the Times of Israel, JP Morgan warns weakened shekel may be long-term trend as it decouples from US stocks.
Weekend Shekel's the name of one of their one-man shows.
A retired Israeli general has warned that Israel could, quote, collapse within a year if this war of attrition continues.
Yitzhak brick, which just goes to show you what we said brick by brick.
But it's also relevant when you consider the very current context, which is that Israel is insistent on continuing to open up new fronts of this genocide into Lebanon, into the occupied West Bank, against the Houthis, in against Syria, all over. They're spreading themselves so thin.
Yeah.
We've already discussed how they are reverting to the ultra Orthodox community and seeking to draft them into the army because they need additional reservists.
As well as trying to recruit African migrants in promise of citizenship, but no citizenship has actually come from such an engagement thus far.
Yeah, so the Middle East Eye reported that a new plan was revealed that Israel is now seeking to lure African migrants, some of the 30,000 African asylum seekers in the country, to join the quote unquote war effort with the promise that they'll be given some sort of a permanent status if they do. But the same article, quoting Haaretz, has told us that those who have joined have actually not received any permanent status or citizenship, that the entire procedure is totally non-transparent and you can't even find out where Israel is sending these individuals, and that they're only receiving 2 weeks of training before they're getting dropped off in Gaza. So doesn't sound like they have the strongest forces going
They're
forward.
dropping them off with McDonald's and a flak vest.
All right, what else?
And this also comes after Netanyahu, also known as Milikowski, had said that he was going to deport all African migrants. So it's a complete 180 from deporting them to Africa versus recruiting them for the genocide.
Yeah, and we've extensively reported on that. His calls on trying to expel the African asylum seekers from the country. He's previously referred to them as infiltrators. He's made a bunch of racist statements against them. So it's really not
the utopia they tell you it is on the TikToks, I tell you.
Yeah. Did you see that video of that music video that Adnan posted?
Oh yeah, where they were dancing on top of the
Yes.
mosque in the old city of Jerusalem, in
and they
perhaps the most disrespectful video on the internet.
Yeah, and the lyrics were like, "So many children dying,"
Yeah.
everyone's crying, like, "Why can't we where's the love?" and all that stuff. And they brought, like, a token Muslim, but their idea of a token Muslim was like a light-skinned brown man wearing an Aladdin vest. It was very weird.
Yeah.
Just
Not a real Muslim in sight
weird.
in that video. And
AJ
it was on
Plus.
top of one of the holiest places in Islam. Like, okay.
I mean, look, nothing like that should shock you. I will never forget
It doesn't
being
shock. It's just like I can't believe I have to keep saying it out loud.
yeah.
Like the words as I'm saying, as they're leaving my mouth, I'm like, wow, this is wild every time.
Yes, but the day that I was in 48 and I saw that they had turned an old mosque into a BDSM dungeon, I was like, nothing is off limits for these folks.
Tough.
No, I was just going to continue on this trend of uplifting news. AJ Plus, in its interview with an analyst, has reported that so many doctors have left the country. People cannot get doctor's appointments because many Israeli doctors have up and left.
Oh no.
285% spike in Israelis leaving the country. That was Middle East Monitor.
They don't have any doctors because they're all busy torturing Palestinians in dungeons.
No, it's wild though that there are actual medical professionals participating in the torture, and that's been extensively reported. They've been asked to perform surgeries that they're not qualified to perform in an experimental manner without anesthesia, and so on and so forth.
I guess Israelis will have to rape themselves with metal rods.
I mean, the Palestinians, right? The joke works if you say.
No, I'm saying like the Israelis who are seeking medical treatment. Like they're not, the doctors are busy raping Palestinians.
Oh, I see. Okay. Ynet, an Israeli news source, had a headline: "Why are physicians leaving Israel?" Another Israeli news source reported about 500,000 people left Israel in the past year. Who knows if that's temporary or if it's permanent?
I've seen figures that's up to 1 million of people who have relocated.
Yeah.
I've seen figures that say between 40 to 60% will not return to the north no matter what happens. There are towns like Metula that are abandoned. Settlers, the Zionist settlers, live in like underground bunkers, and they monitor drones that come in like on their own because the Israeli military, the Israeli state is incapable of doing so because their infrastructure has been attacked so much by Hezbollah, the spy infrastructure that I talked about a while ago when they were like the stuff that works for the Iron Dome, all of their geo coordinates, all of that is now mush.
And apparently no one actually knows how many people have actually left, because apparently all these various institutions within the state have all different numbers. So apparently the National Insurance Agency has different numbers than the Central Bureau has, than the airports are reporting. So it's really unclear how many people have actually left, but
not enough.
It's quite clear that there is a movement en masse outside of the country. Oh, the best part is the Israeli analyst who's giving all of this information in the AJ Plus interview. He says that because so many people from the Central Bureau have left the country themselves, they find themselves unable to actually report the statistics because the people who do the statistics reporting have themselves left.
That's so funny. We would love to tell you how many people left, but the statisticians are gone.
Right.
The statisticians, the guy who keeps track of all of the people who leave, he left. Their number is frozen. Their number is frozen the way that they're trying to project the Palestinian death toll as being frozen since January or whatever the fuck. This shit is like, whose line is it anyways? Which like the numbers are all made up, especially on their side.
Yeah. And it's not just this one guy in this AJ Plus interview. It's a lot of other Israeli analysts and commentators. Of course, Ilan Pappé in June 2024 penned an article called "The Collapse of Zionism." Israeli historian Moshe Zimmerman wrote, "The Hamas pogrom demonstrated that Zionism has failed." Another Zionist commentator has written, "Will Zionism survive the war?" and answered, no.
And we remember Yaakov Sharet from 2021 or 2022. He was the son of a former prime minister. He himself worked for the Shin Bet. And he was like, Zionism's cooked. It's done. We got to get out of here. Everybody talks about like Aliyah, but like we need to start doing like Yarida, which is get the fuck out.
Yes. And the analyst who was interviewed explains that this is not just anti-Zionists. This is consensus amongst Zionists and anti-Zionists who are all watching the same thing and commenting that this is where things are headed. Haaretz posted an article called, "At this rate, Israel won't make it to its 100th birthday."
Why are we giving birthdays to states? Who's doing that?
The important thing here is that you don't really hear about this very often. So I think it's important to keep this in mind as you're consuming also all of the daily horrors from Gaza and the West Bank. And it doesn't make the daily reality any less, any more bearable. It's just some perspective.
It allows us to envision a brighter
An end.
future.
And an end
Yes.
to this, like a day
Yes.
when we can actually be free, a day when we are not burned and shredded and eviscerated, and a day when our bodies don't vanish, you know, in 9-meter craters when they bomb tents of displaced people in a so-called safe zone like they did about a week ago, and dozens of Palestinians were just disappeared in a moment. And we don't even have time to grieve that massacre because they've replaced it with a new horror the day after and the day after. If this was like any other people, we would be allowed to grieve it, and there would be like, some sort of like recognition of it. Or but it's like, because we're Palestinian, all of our atrocities are just hidden, and they're not even acknowledged. They're just completely ignored while they're happening in real time. And I think that's one of the most dangerous forms of genocide denial, is just ignoring it while it's happening in real time, not saying anything about it. Like, it's one thing to like misframe everything as a war or whatever, but it's another thing to just not even just pretend like nothing is happening. So keep these things in mind, and let's continue to look for this type of information, because it also gives us a sense of where things are going. Because keep in mind that there is so much spin in the mainstream media, the way they're presenting this, as a war that can be won. It cannot be won, because the objective they set out from the very beginning is an unattainable objective. It is unattainable.
There are martyrs who have given their lives to this cause. Listen to them.
Interestingly, our whole thing was about Israeli analysts predicting the demise, so it doesn't really flow from what we just said. But
What did I?
fair point. No, because
Yeah.
you're saying listen to the Palestinians who are saying this, but like my
Oh
whole thing
yeah.
was like
So
all
what?
the Israelis are saying it's falling.
Well, we've been saying it's falling for some time. So just because they are now saying it
Yeah,
doesn't mean
fair.
that like
So it
they're any
doesn't.
more valid. It's
Right, right.
actually what Jill Stein was talking about in her Breakfast Club interview, where it's like, if the people want something and the president wants something, then the Congress would actually have to fall in line, right?
Yeah,
The people who are occupying Palestine have had to fall in line with this position that they don't necessarily support, but they've been put in a position where it's their only option.
yeah.
They're not coming at it from a place of morality. They're not marching in the streets like, "Oh my god, we've been destroying Palestinian lives for
No,
generations now." They're like, "Hey, I can't go to the beach anymore, and I don't like that."
yeah.
So, and they
So
can
they've
still go to the
risen up.
beach, but like they can't, like, they're a little upset. So, but they're not upset at the right things.
I mean,
They're upset that their daily life is being interrupted, that their comfort is being interrupted, that their perception abroad is being maligned, right? Because now they recognize, like, oh, people fucking hate us. And they've been trying to be like, oh, it's because we're Jewish, because we're Jewish. But then Jews everywhere were like, it's not because you're Jewish, right? And so now they're at a place where they're like, ah, damn, people hate us.
and I mean, that's why you're so dangerous to them. I mean, I keep saying it over and over, but like people like you are so dangerous to them. The anti-Zionist Jewish people are always going to be extremely dangerous to them, because they undermine the very essence of the propaganda, which is that, Judaism equals Zionism, and you can't criticize Zionism. And once you unlink those two, well, then you absolutely can criticize Zionism. And that's what we've been saying this whole time. That's what Palestinians have been saying this entire time.
Yeah.
You can criticize Zionism because it's not Judaism.
And you should.
And you should, because that
And
ideology is
Jews always
responsible.
have.
Yeah, since its inception. And it's responsible for this genocide in Palestine, this ongoing Nakba for over 76 years, the uprooting of an indigenous population, dispossessing them, dispersing them all around the world, preventing them from returning to their homes and their land. And they continue every single day to steal more and more and more land. Like, I'm just like scrolling through my feed and I'm like, oh, settler moves into a Palestinian family's home in Hebron. They just moved into the apartment. Just fucking
Yeah.
freaks, like just moved in. They show up with the army, with the occupation forces. So of course you're just going to be able to walk right into the house and take it because you're being propped up by an army that's helping you in this illegal takeover.
Do you know how hard it is to get an apartment in Los Angeles?
Probably
Okay.
hard.
These motherfuckers they just walk into places.
Yeah.
There's no deposit. There's no background check. It's not even
No.
their place.
They're not paying for it.
Yeah.
They just
The
take it.
army's stealing it.
Can you imagine if that's just how everything worked? If you could just take things and then that would be it?
I'd live in the Wells Fargo building.
There's been a lot of talk about UNRWA funding. And I think it was the EU recently decided not to fund UNRWA schools due to Zionist propaganda that says that the UNRWA schools are teaching terrorism. Meanwhile, nobody's ever taken a look at what Israeli schools are teaching children. An Israeli kindergarten organized a special event focused on introducing young children to military culture. As part of the event, the children were dressed in Israeli military uniforms and provided with symbolic military ID cards. The day was designed to familiarize them with aspects of military life at an early age. And the Instagram posts were captioned, "Our Future Warriors."
Whoa.
And there are photos, and it is very shocking. And what is crazy about this is that I have an anti-Zionist Jewish friend who was formerly Israeli and renounced her citizenship when she came back to the US. And she attended one of these things. It was in her kindergarten. And she was like, that was like one of the first moments that I kind of like looking back on it when I grew up, I was like, that was weird. Maybe that shouldn't have happened. And when she started reflecting on like the propaganda and the indoctrination, she told me that like it starts so young. It starts when you're like 2, 3, 4 years old.
Yeah.
So
I was
yeah.
gonna say, what was that? My shul?
What does
Where
that mean?
Oh, it's like my temple. Like it could have
Oh,
been like it was a joke that it could have happened to any temple in the United States or anywhere. But where did it actually happen?
it happened in
Oh, it's
48.
inside Palestine? Oh wow,
Yeah, it's
crazy.
in 40. It's in 48. Yeah,
Damn. Yeah.
and it's like they have kindergartner faces on Israeli military ID cards. It's very creepy. No, but you know the reaction from I know that what the reaction is from Europe when this is brought to the attention of the European
Yeah. What is
Union.
it?
They say, well, we don't fund Israeli schools, so we don't care what they say in their schools. We don't fund
Do
them,
they
so we
not
don't
fund
care.
Israeli schools?
Not this. No, they fund the state of Israel, but they don't funnel money to the schools. Whereas
Yeah.
in funding UNRWA, they are funding money. It's a technicality, like everything is. It's always a technicality. It's never about substance. It's always like gotcha. It's always like one of those things. So
Yeah. Kamala's been hitting me up for money recently. And I figure I'll just cut out the middleman and donate directly to the occupation.
yeah. Uh, oh, also, I don't know if you heard about this, but this is consistent with like people that are high up, distancing themselves from the actions of the occupation forces. The author of the Israeli Army's ethics code has said that the troops are violating it in Gaza. He says there is no doubt that many thousands of I mean, listen to it's just so dehumanizing in any event, but listen to what he
Yeah.
says. There's no doubt that many thousands of non-involved Gazans have died, a fact which has to be considered by anyone whose principles include the sanctity of human life. Beyond the mere fact of uploading the videos to social media, which is by definition a violation of field security, the acts depicted a wide range of improper conduct. A democratic country cannot be in a situation where fighting continues for political or personal considerations without the justification of absolute necessity. This is totally like a last ditch effort to save the collapsing colony and try to portray it as being better than it is. Like, no, 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 we are democratic. We don't do this. I wrote the ethics code,
He's like,
but it's
first of
just,
all, we have a code of ethics. I know you wouldn't know that by looking at what we've done, but we do. And they're breaking it. It sounds like he's about to join the statistician on vacation,
the official Hostages Families Forum is putting up billboards all over Israel that demand the continuation of the genocide in Gaza after the hostages are retrieved. So in Hebrew, the huge billboards say, bringing back, then going back.
And then there's that person who was involved with Eurovision. Like they performed on Eurovision, and now they're going
Yes.
back to join the occupation army.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, even there are people who are like supposedly like entertainers or like whatever, and this girl was a soldier, so she was fair game. Everybody is involved. Zionists are propagandized inside 48 to support this genocide.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that it reflects the majority opinion in this
Yes.
society. I mean, the majority opinion is that Palestinians should be massacred,
You
as many of them as
remember
possible.
the clip of the two nice Jewish boys who had their little podcast go viral about pushing a button, right? Erasing all Palestinians, 5 million people with the push of a button, and then like responding with like button emojis before getting scrubbed from the internet. But I did see an update that their Patreon was taken down. So that's good
Oh,
news.
really?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Other news on the international law front, South Africa is pushing forward in its case against Israel for genocide before the ICJ. Apparently has been under pressure from the US to drop the case, and they've basically said, screw you, we're not doing that. And the case is continuing.
Yeah, not
Uh,
only are they not doing that, but they are going to file a case against the United States as well for supplying, funding, and aiding the genocide.
yes, I saw that as well. I saw that being reported like crazy, but I didn't see an official statement from South Africa, so I held off on reporting it. But yes, it's been reported, hasn't been confirmed yet. So, yeah, look, it's important that we have some allies like them that are willing to do this work because I can't imagine the pressure that they're under. And I bet you, like, they're being threatened, their families are being threatened. Like, there's nothing which is not fair game here. I mean, if you just look at the public threats that US senators made towards the ICC
Mm-hmm.
after Karim Khan demanded the arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, a bunch of US congresspeople wrote a letter saying, you have been warned to the ICC. If you go after Israel, you have been warned. Like, we will take action. And this is a country, the US, which has already sanctioned the ICC previously, but the threats that they made were even more elevated than what they've previously done to the former prosecutor, who, when she decided that she was going to open an investigation into Israel's crimes in Palestine, the US immediately put her on a no-fly list, couldn't enter the US, denied her visas to come to the General Assembly in New York, froze her bank accounts in the US and those of other ICC officials. And they were happy to put sanctions on her and probably will be doing the same and more once these arrest warrants are issued. And we have reason to believe that they are probably going to be issued very soon because the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs has posted and deleted a condemnation of the arrest warrants. In anticipation of the arrest warrants, it was reported that Israel often spies on international organizations and may have had advance notice that these arrest warrants were going to be issued. So let's wait and see what comes of that.
Just feels like the yummiest way to find out that they are going to get the warrants is by them being like, we don't even believe these warrants are legit. Oh shit, we posted that early.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. But let's see, like if these warrants are issued in the next month or next week or 2 weeks, then that really will show you that they are spying on international organizations, trying to disrupt all of these international processes for accountability and doing anything and everything they can to meddle with the procedure. And it's just so on brand for a colony which is committing genocide. It's just so on brand. Like, would they do anything differently?
No,
But
the
it's definitely
occupation.
not on brand for a democracy, right? Democracies don't do things like that. Democracies believe in procedure and accountability and processes but yeah.
Yeah. The occupation, when they accidentally posted that thing, they acted like Shannon Sharp recently. Did you hear what happened? Where he's like, somebody hacked my account. I don't even know how that stuff got uploaded. Okay. And if you don't understand that joke, I'm not going to explain it, but people who do understand it will enjoy it. Folks, that has been another episode of the Palestine Pod. Thank you all so much for listening. Check out our full episodes and sources at www.palestinepod.com. Follow us on Instagram at The Palestine Pod. Send us an email at palestinepod@gmail.com and look for us on Patreon, www.patreon.com/PalestinePod. That has been another episode of the pod. Thank you all so much for listening. Have as good a day as you can.
We can start telling people to join the Patreon. The show wouldn't be possible without a Patreon. You got to get on our Patreon. Support us on Patreon. You can, because like I've been watching all these other podcasts and they just keep plugging Patreon like all the time.
Yeah, I'm going to clip what you just did right now.
Okay.